The Wanderer by Fritz Leiber, or Fritz Leiber, is a science fiction novel published in 1964. I am putting a strategically placed finger over this unclothed cat lady. This book is set in a world where this enormous entity or object appears in Earth's orbit, seemingly materializing out of a portal or a wormhole of some sort. And we are following an enormous cast of characters. There are dozens of characters here scattered across Earth, and some of them are actually on a base on the moon. And all of these different people, you're jumping between these different perspectives as they are trying to theorize what this object, which they deem the Wanderer, actually is. And most people look at it and see that it vaguely resembles another planet. And so there's a lot of speculation about how a planet could actually travel, why it has showed up in Earth's orbit, and what the implications are. And actually it turns out that the implications are quite drastic for Earth, because it goes on to subsume the moon, and then due to the gravitational effects of the Wanderer and the destruction of the moon, there are these enormous widespread climate catastrophes, including flooding, earthquakes, and civil unrest. Reading this one, I was almost immediately disappointed in the writing. I think it's quite badly written. Leiber will constantly pepper you with similes and metaphors and really boring, dull dialogue. And I think boring is actually the best word to describe this book, because after about 140 pages, which is just less than halfway, absolutely nothing interesting happens. It's just jumping between all of these different perspectives, none of which are interesting, by the way. None of the characters are compelling in any sense of the word, and they're having these dull conversations about the Wanderer and the state of the world. And because it jumps between character to character to character, it completely kills the pacing, because just as something interesting is about to happen, you jump to someone else, and once again, absolutely nothing is happening. Now, at a certain point, something does happen, which involves these alien cat ladies, which is probably a bit of a minor spoiler, so feel free to skip ahead if you don't really want to hear about that. But the people who are on the moon base get consumed by this planet, and then we're following one character as he's having an encounter with this alien cat lady, and she is supposedly part of this super civilization who are intelligent beyond human imagination and are obviously capable of transporting and constructing enormous objects across space and time. And this really annoyed me as well, because this is supposedly a hyper-intelligent alien being who speaks in this primitive, juvenile, monosyllabic manner, which doesn't really make any sense to me, because if they are capable of speech and learning alien languages and constructing these enormous planet-like vessels, why can they not string a sentence together in a way that doesn't make them sound like cavemen? So yeah, this one is extremely boring and badly written. There's one point, I was talking about the similes and metaphors, where Leiber describes someone being on the other side of a ship as like a planet being on the other side of a solar system, and then he describes the galaxy as a dark forest, which has become quite a popular theory, the dark forest theory. But then he goes on to talk about the Earth and the moon like two people sat around a campfire in this dark forest. And it's just line after line after line of simile or metaphor. And I'm just thinking to myself the entire time, please get on with it, because we are 150 pages in and nothing has happened. I got a little bit worked up there talking about this one, because I do feel like it wasted my time. It is quite a bit longer than most books from this period, coming in at about 350 pages. And so, just to summarise, it's too long, it's too boring, and it's too badly written. Apologies for this clumsy insert, but I forgot to mention one thing that really annoyed me in The Wanderer, as if all of that wasn't enough already. Fritz Leiber is constantly referencing science fiction as a genre He's mentioning other writers and specific works. And this is something that does pop up every now and then in other science fiction books, but generally it's limited to 1 or 2 mentions. But here he is constantly doing it in a way that I found to be incredibly annoying, and it comes off a little bit like fan fiction, like he's not a proper writer, he's just paying homage to all of these different authors, and it frustrated me every time it popped up throughout the novel. So I just wanted to get that in there because it is really intrusive. So I then went to another book in the sort of big dumb object subgenre, which is broadly about humans encountering some sort of entity or object in space or on another planet that has kind of mysterious origins. And the book I went to next was Orbitsville by Bob Shaw. And this one is actually signed by Bob Shaw, who says, "To Dave, with best wishes, Bob Shaw." So for the purpose of the rest of this video, my name is Dave. This one was published in 1975, so almost a decade after The Wanderer. And it's set in a world where humanity have colonized another planet that they refer to as Terra Nova. And there is this space exploration organization called Starflight, who have been set up to search the universe for other planets that humanity can expand to. And we're following a Starflight ship captain named Garamond, who is determined to find the third world, which I thought was quite funny. And he is summoned for an audience with the president of Starflight, who is a woman named Elizabeth Lamond, I think. And she is this incredibly imposing, powerful figure who rules with an iron fist and is quite ruthless in nature. And while he is waiting for an audience with her, he is tasked with watching her son for a while, this young boy, who he's watching in the courtyard of this kind of grand palace where she resides. And while under his care, this young boy climbs up on a statue, falls off of it, hits his head, and dies. And this inspires a bit of a panic response in Garamond, who thinks that because she is so ruthless, she will punish him by potentially killing him and or his wife and his own son. So he hides the body and he flees, getting into his spaceship and setting off from Earth. And in an effort to get somewhere and hide, he decides to seek out a solar system which appeared on some recovered star maps from an extinct alien civilization on another planet that humanity discovered, which had been seemingly devastated by a war between 2 races of aliens. And so he's had this hunch for a while that there might be something in this solar system that was marked on this star map from these aliens, but his theory has been frequently disregarded, and therefore that solar system has not been properly explored. So he takes his ship and his quite sizable crew to this solar system, and that's when they encounter the titular Orbitsville. Now, Orbitsville is essentially a Dyson sphere. It's this enormous construction built around a star to capture its energy and provide this inhabitable space on the interior of this enormous sphere. When they get there, they find that the sphere has only got one entrance, and outside of the entrance there are all of these derelict spaceships which have seemingly been stripped for parts or damaged as a result of some kind of conflict. When Garamond goes into this enormous construction, he finds that there are enormous sprawling prairies of fields and lakes and rivers in this almost unending paradise. And there are the ruins of alien buildings and constructions, but at first there appears to be no sign of life within what Garamond dubs Orbitsville. They determine that the space is so big that the entire population of humanity could find the space to live millions and millions and million times over and still have room to spare. And so he thinks that this discovery is so important that if he reports back to Earth and to Starflight, Elizabeth Lamond, the president, will show mercy on him because he will be such a famous and important figure in human history that she will spare him and his family. And so that's exactly what he does. He radios back to Earth. All of these human ships come and they start establishing a colony on the interior surface of Orbitsville, which she calls officially Lamond Land or something? Lamond Land? Anyway, that's pretty much all I'm going to talk about in terms of the plot, because I don't want to spoil some quite cool reveals and some interesting directions that the story goes in. But this one was much better than The Wanderer. It opens with a bang, it moves at quite a frenetic pace, and it keeps you reading in a way that I would describe as being a bit of a page turner, especially in the first half. Something interesting does happen in almost every chapter that makes you want to read the next one. And I burned through this one in a couple of days, whereas The Wanderer took me over a week to read, which is quite slow for me. And I think some of the characters are quite interesting, particularly Elizabeth Lamond. I think she's quite a memorable villain figure, and I found Bob Shaw's writing to be quite good and seamless and flowing. And I've read one other Bob Shaw book before, which was The Palace of Eternity, which I really liked. This is not quite as good as that, but I do think that it's a worthwhile read. There does come a point in the story where it feels like Bob Shaw wasn't particularly sure. I didn't mean to make that joke there. Bob Shaw wasn't sure where to take the plot, and it does take quite a significant turn before coming back around and building to an ending, which I didn't find particularly satisfying, but the journey and the questions raised were all interesting enough to pull me through this one. I know that this is the first book in a trilogy. I do own the second book, which is called Orbitsville Departure. I can't remember what the third book is called, but I would potentially be interested in reading on in this series. But probably not for a while, because if I was going to read another Bob Shaw book, there are a few others that I would probably get to before Orbitsville Departure. Both of these books are present in Science Fiction, the 100 Best Novels list by David Pringle. If you're new here, I know a bunch of you are, I'm reading through this entire list as part of a challenge on the channel. If you've been around for a while, you are definitely sick of me mentioning this. But I'm making pretty good progress. I'm coming up to around the halfway mark, I think. And I'll keep reading these books and peppering in some other stuff as well, just to retain my sanity, because I'm finding that quite a few of the earlier books in this list are annoying me in the way that The Wanderer annoyed me. And actually, I think if I wasn't reading this entire list, I would have DNF'd The Wanderer. But because I am, I feel like I do need to read everything fully for completionist's sake. If you have been watching my videos for a while, you've been following my broken wrist saga, you'll see that I'm now out of my cast. I'm still wearing some kind of wrist support, but I am able to resume my regular activities and should be able to get videos out more frequently and edited in a more polished fashion. In terms of stuff coming up, I am going to be reading The World Inside by Robert Silverberg with Robin at Bookspin, who's invited me to come and have a discussion about this book with him on his channel, so look out for that one. I will post a link when that's available. And yeah, I'll continue with the book reviews, hauls, and lists. So thank you very much for watching. Apologies for the rant about The Wanderer, but I did need to get that off my chest, and I will see you on the next one.